How's everybody doing? All right. This is going to be, and by the way, can we give a shout out to Leanne? She's been like wonderful on this stage all day. So what a day, what a lineup, right? We're like on the stage Tom Brady was at, so I think that makes us like Hall of Famers. Maybe Melissa and Felicia will have some questions for us. But we're going to talk about, kind of the intersection really of technology, of education, of scale, and of the entire ecosystem. There's no doubt that Emerge and the vision for Emerge has been to build exactly what Miami has today. The ecosystem that's supporting from startups to entrepreneurs, to innovation, and more importantly, to companies that are coming in and saying, hey, we want to have our headquarters here. And when you talk to the mayors and others, the one thing that sometimes they believe could kind of stop their growth could be talent. And so I want you first to kind of just start with a brief intro of yourself, your company, and most importantly, how you see the acquisition of human capital and talent in the ecosystem of innovation, technology, entrepreneurship, not just here in Miami. As we know, Miami's the gateway to Latin America, but really becoming the capital of capital, as Saifa Shuf always says, right here happening in Miami. So we'll go ahead and start with you.
Awesome. That's a great introduction. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. My name is Kiel Berry. I run an early stage venture capital fund that really focuses on two human existential threats. One side, climate change, and on the other side, really solving for the inequality gap. And so we're investing in early companies in the US and in Europe that are software forward, focused on solving for those initiatives.
Excuse me. Hi there. Jackie Kossmann. I'm a partner at Congruent Ventures. We're an early stage climate tech fund based in the Bay Area and invest throughout North America. And we manage about 600 million AUM at the moment. So think of us as very early stage, pre-seed to Series A, and getting involved with climate tech startups very early in their journey. And we define climate tech very broadly. It could be a nuclear fusion company, it could be a retail brand, as long as there is some climate or sustainability impact.
So as you may know, Miami's launched kind of just on the model, the Israeli model of the Innovation Fund, really dealing a lot of it with climate tech and how tech can solve for the world's problems. And so my question to the two of you is, what do you look for in companies or startups when you're looking at them for scale? What is it that you're trying to see? What are the pillars that you've seen as you've invested across companies that have been able to go from startup to scale and to really positioning themselves to be a global solution for global issues like climate change and the issues that we're facing with climate? So we'll start, Jackie, and then we'll come back this way.
Yeah, so the thing I always like to emphasize is sustainability. And I use that term very broadly. For something to really be impactful at scale, at international scale, at venture scale, at market scale, it has to be sustainable, not just in that it makes some kind of environmental or ecosystem impact. It has to be sustainable in that it's a standalone business that makes sense and makes money and is economical. So when I'm looking at early stage founders, it truly is, okay, how does this company really build a durable business that's really impactful, not just in terms of climate and the environment, but also just economically? How does it change people's lives? How does it change the way we consume? How does it improve society? And at the end of the day, how does this become a enduring venture scale business?
Yeah, I think what's interesting, and especially when it comes to climate tech, and we can get into talent as well. We're seeing, and what the types of talent we're seeing go into the space, which I think is also really interesting. But the younger generation is seeing these apocalyptic depictions of what the future might look like, right? And if people are watching TV, if you've seen extrapolations on Apple TV, or Dune, or Blade Runner, or Ready Player Go, these are apocalyptic depictions of us scrambling for resources, where there's mass climate migration, and really all these kind of negative attributes of what the future might be. And so what I'm looking for in startups are ones that see this as an opportunity to really solve for that and see that there's an opportunity to create massive value. We're venture capitalists at the end of the day. And so that's one thing, is kind of seeing what that North Star looks like in terms of the opportunity. And then from a brass tacks, in addition to all the generalist things you look for in startups as a venture capitalist, the reality is when it comes to sustainability, can I just be real here, a secret about human behavior, right? There's like human incentives that really drive people to buy product and adopt product. And that's price, convenience, and maybe the third is vanity. And so what I like to see is companies that realize that North Star, but are really leveraging human incentive structures that have been around for centuries to really drive scale.
It's so true, right? We're not going to gimmick our way out of real serious issues that face us, right? And if you're looking at some of the things in technology, you kind of think, we just launched our second AI center at Miami-Dade College, and we launched our metaverse campus. And I was saying to our team, it can't feel like it's a gimmick. It can't feel like a student doesn't walk through the doors of the Metaversity of Miami-Dade College and not feel like they have a sense of belonging, because we know that that's how consumers make decisions, right? On that emotional feeling and price and all the other variables. So that's such a good point and really good advice. We have many of our students right here in the front row, so that's great sage advice.
Awesome.
All right, so Cal, I want to stay with you for a minute because in your previous TED Talk, you discussed how building bridges between different industries and global markets can generate big ideas. Drawing from that experience and bridging entertainment and tech industries, how do you envision this formula of collaboration being applied industries into the future? And how do you see companies really supporting that kind of cross collaboration?
For sure. I think that's really one of the interesting things. Now, as I look forward to the types of companies that will really be built and find that scale that you mentioned, it's really those, and during the TED Talk I was saying, it's kind of those who are sitting at the intersection of, two disparate industries. So at scale, that would be a good example maybe is Amazon, right? They are an e-commerce company, but especially after the purchase of One Medical, now they are also a healthcare company, right? And so being able to leverage the user base they built out from the e-commerce business to overlay other types of offerings to that same consumer base. And so when it comes to climate, I think what's really interesting and we're starting to see is that start to happen. So for example, a good example of some companies we've seen before are maybe those who are mixing finance and energy. So what does that mean? That means that maybe now consumers are being able to get paid for conserving energy. Maybe they're being able to get paid for generating energy in like distributed kind of virtual power plant models that we've seen on the climate side. So I think from a Mission One capital standpoint, that's what's really exciting for us, are companies that are really identifying business models that they've seen from the traditional industries be successful and applying those to industries like energy and carbon markets and environmental management tools and mobility, et cetera. That intersection is really where I think companies will find scale going forward.
Oh, that's great. And I think one of the things that we saw COVID, post-COVID, is really the use of technology in collaborative spaces, right? And not having to go across the world to collaborate, but to really collaborate using, whether it's a Zoom room or a Teams room. And I think that's now is in a fabric of how we all work or how we approach working together. Jackie, I want to go to you. Share a little bit about the companies in your portfolio and what are you excited about?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, we invest really broadly. An example of a company that we have is a nuclear fusion company that's building modular fusion reactors that will their kind of beachhead market is they're going to be powering spacecraft. So pretty wild stuff. And then we also have stuff that's kind of a little bit more near term that is closer to enabling mass EV adoption and electrification of the home and that type of technology. I mentioned we do have consumer-facing companies that are, whether it's in retail or in brands, or we actually have a lot in ag and food and consumption. We have a alternative protein company called Meaty that's in Sprouts and Whole Foods and a bunch of other places, soon to be Sweetgreen, that's made from mycelium. And just these when you look at the impacts of meat and animal husbandry and ag, that's a huge source of emissions. And there's ways to develop meat alternatives that are actually taste good, are actually incredibly healthy and very efficient to make and produce and cost competitive with meat. So, stuff like that we're excited about, that again, I see as sustainable because people actually want to eat it, right? And they're not doing it for greenwashing or not doing it out of guilt. And the team that built that company actually was originally doing energy storage, and they pivoted. They were exploring mycelium for energy storage and then pivoted to an alternative meat product. So just that kind of very scrappy, innovative, flexible approach to entrepreneurship is cool and exciting. And I did want to underscore Kyle as well, some really, really great points about when we look at big tech and the successful platform companies, and you're seeing kind of the nexus of different consumers, B2C, B2B. It's really, especially now with energy and electrification and AI, that's now coming to our homes, right? That's becoming very much like a domestic thing that we're all thinking about. We're thinking about how do we, save on our energy bill? How do we become buffered against, these crazy weather events like extreme hurricanes like you guys are experiencing here? And so, how do startups that are making people more comfortable and secure in their homes, and whether they're leveraging AI or behind the meter grid technology, heat pumps, whatever it is, but things that are just again, improving our lives on a daily basis in terms of safety and the economics.
No, it's so true. Emerge just had over the weekend, leading up to this at the Idea Center at Miami-Dade College, a hackathon. And when we debuted the AI Center, we had the 3 winners present. And one of them are 2 brothers who presented basically using ChatGPT. They went in and gathered information that's public knowledge out there about the streets and the infrastructure and the grid and all of that. And then using virtually enhanced software, they were able to show the county where those potential areas of flooding were. And so I think it's how we bring that from just feeling this is a nice to have, almost feeling like this is necessary in solving for global issues, in solving for climate issues, but most importantly, I think in doing work and in the way that we learn, the way that we live, and the way that we play. And so I want to ask you both. I know there's people here, students from Florida International University, from the University of Miami, and of course, Miami-Dade College. Where do you see education playing a role, and how does higher education become a real partner in climate tech and climate solutions, and how can we be supportive of the ecosystem that you all are investing in? And I think that everyone that is interested in the future cares about, because we know it is such an existential threat.
Interesting. I think a few things. One is I'll say, the education system is starting to augment, some of the things you mentioned are super innovative, right? Because you're seeing what's happening in the marketplace. You're seeing the technologies that are coming out, as well as what people want to work on, and you guys are creating centers of innovation for that to actually happen on the campus. And so I think that's really interesting, where higher education can actually be nimble as well and start to really pivot based on where they see the opportunities for their students to actually learn and be a part of society. And so I think when it comes to climate tech, it's similar where, practically, if we start to look at the student body and where they're going to be when they're actually running different organizations. Where will the world be? Where will human society be? And therefore, what types of skill sets do they need to learn now in order to practically apply those to those existential threats we're all kind of seeing? I think on the other side as well is students. Jackie said had an amazing metric she mentioned in terms of really the Gen Z and what they want to be working on is. And so listening to what they want to be working on and kind of also building centers of innovation based on the fact that, for example, young people want to work on climate solutions. So how do we give them the tools to actually leverage AI, leverage other types of technologies to actually apply that interest and kind of see that to fruition? So.
Great.
I mean, in terms of educational and professional paths that are kind of in the climate ecosystem, there is massive, massive, massive opportunity right now. I mean, there's so much policy and industry trend towards onshoring, right? We have the CHIPS Act, we have the Inflation Reduction Act, we have the IIJA, and so many of these programs that we want to bring and keep tech here and tech talent here. And there is so much support nationally, and so whether it's we've said AI a lot, and that's obviously a very topical theme, and that's exploding. And I do think there will be a lot that we see that is truly AI enabled, and it's definitely the next wave of tech innovation. But things like semiconductors, things like battery tech, things like material science, again, with all the onshoring we're seeing with incentives for buying American vehicles, right? Or the CHIPS Act, like onshoring semiconductors, there's a ton of opportunity there. And, obviously there's a lot of emphasis on engineering and technical backgrounds, but with all these subsidies, you're also going to see a lot of kind of nuance in financing all these projects, whether it's a hydrogen project or like a long duration storage project, or, it's an energy market, or if it's, distributed energy resources. Like, it's all going to get really complicated as the grid gets more complicated, as we need like a truly diversified energy mix. So I think focus on do you want to be on the policy side of that? Do you want to be on the finance side of that? I mean, there's like gonna be like upwards of $1 trillion flowing into all these different initiatives based on the recent policies that have been enacted. So I'm excited because there's tons of opportunity. It's kind of like, try and pick your path. And I think with, AI also, what's interesting is like we're seeing a lot. I mean, that it is a moving target. It is happening so fast, and anyone who can kind of really get specialized in that and kind of keep up, because things are just continuing to get automated. And so being able to kind of see around corners and where the market's going, I think is critical as well.
Yeah, and I think we're already starting to see it on the ground in terms of the types of companies we're able to invest into, right? So, we talked about what we look at and what we look for in startups that we're investing in. We're also looking for companies and founders that are really exploiting these opportunities where capital is going to be flowing from the policy level, right? So, I'll give some examples of my portfolio. There's a company called Charger Help, for example, that really deals in the EV infrastructure maintenance and repair space. So, today we have 50,000 or so charging stations in the US, but, we're going to need millions in terms of the EV infrastructure, the charging infrastructure in the US based on where EV vehicle sales are going to be going in the future. EV vehicles, we're at 5% penetration of all new vehicles, but if, we're trying to get to 50, 60% of all new vehicles to be EV by 2030, that's going to mean we're going to have the infrastructure, right? So what Charter Help realized is that as that tailwind of infrastructure development happens, obviously that's a CapEx intensive opportunity, they can build software to actually, track the maintenance and repair of those charging stations as they get rolled out, for example. Or another company called Zevi, which deals in the basically it's like a financing, like you mentioned. There's other angles and enabling tools, like it's financing for EV vehicle ownership for Uber drivers and other gig workers who, either can't qualify for certain types of fixed types of loans based on their mileage, or they need a flexible lease that kind of goes along with how they make their money, right? And so, they're going to be able to benefit from the tax credits around EV vehicle ownership. That's going to bring down the cost of EV ownership, and they can pass that on to their customer base, right? So I think there's a lot of interesting models that are going to be enabled through a lot of that regulation and regulatory change that you mentioned, that Jackie just mentioned.
Yeah, and I, as I listen to the two of you, I think about ways, again, that in the talent space, how do we almost become open source, right? For a long time, we've really been closed source, right? And it's almost, for us to be able to do it, we're going to need to take every great idea and scale. And I think about, at Miami-Dade College, we started a partnership with Tesla on automotive technicians. And so what happened there is that then two local, Bean Automotive and Warren Henry came to us and said, we want the same program. And so now we've, done the apprenticeship programs with those companies. And I think tomorrow, if someone else comes, the ability to do that, I think, is going to be the only way that we solve for talent. Because as I think about the companies you're investing in, I think about, okay, what do our students need to be prepared with? And I think, one, the applied knowledge, and I don't want to ever forget that in order for you to think critically, you've got to have a knowledge base, and you really can't bypass that. So the art of learning is so important, in gaining that knowledge. The skills that we've known for a long time, communication skills, design thinking, and problem solving skills, but I think now a whole set of digital skills. Whether you're going into teaching, you're going into healthcare, you're going into clean tech, or you're doing a vertical of technology, of computer science, the need to know what fuels artificial intelligence, right? That there's a new aggregator of knowledge that's out there. How do you take it and apply it ethically, and to advance for the greater good? But I also think about cybersecurity. All these things that we keep talking about all have a thread of technology, right? So those cybersecurity skills, and then around, Amazon Web Services and cloud computing, everyone doing the cloud computing. And so my question to you both is, how do you see, and we had a great panel yesterday on the eGov tech part at the PAM Museum about employers. What do they need to be doing to be working with academia, with government on the policy side, with you all investing in startups and companies that have the promising solutions of the future, to make sure we meet the moment of talent? What do you think needs to be happening there?
Yeah, I think you hit on some really interesting things, and it's interesting to hear some of the work you're doing, because it kind of hits on some very key points. Also, another place where academia can really play a role. It's not just the kind of high-end engineer that we're talking about that's really going to take advantage of this opportunity, right? It's also, when you think about the workforce, and also when you think about the inequality gap and those that also need to be brought into this kind of opportunity that we see in front of us, there's going to have to be a large kind of reskilling of the current workforce, because a lot of times if you think about the jobs that they're currently doing, or could be ones that won't exist in 10 years. And so how do you make sure that we can turn over the skill set of the workforce to, like you mentioned, learn how to work with Tesla? I mean, that you have to understand not just how to put cars together, but they're doing it in very innovative ways. And so you have to understand the differences in manufacturing. We talked about all the other CHIPS Act and all the other things around onshoring. Talent has to be there to actually meet those opportunities from the top level, which is what people get excited about, but the really important level is reskilling those who are actually going to be doing the development of this at the ground level. And so I think reskilling ultimately is a really big, important place where both universities but also the government should really be able to back that to help that happen so we don't get left behind.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, whether the big companies, whether it's Google, we were talking to them yesterday, about creating something around cybersecurity, stackable credentials, certificates that lead to associates that lead to bachelors, right? And the investment of just upskilling as it goes. But even thinking about your entry-level positions, if you're out there and you think that you're going to get who you need with 3 years experience at an entry-level job, it's probably not not going to happen. And by the time they have 3 years experience, you can't afford them, right? And so I think also the way that we together in this, whether it's policy and whether it's practice or industry and academia, is also even the way we onboard our talent, and this idea of how it used to be, but how it's really going to be for the future, and this leveling up of credentials. Jackie, how do you see that? What's your insights there?
Yeah, all really awesome points. I did want to touch back on kind of this. I love what you guys have with the Tesla partnership, and I think that should be like just such a brilliant case study example of how corporations can partner with academia and education and really help build that pipeline for talent. To your point of like people coming out that had not as much practical knowledge and skill, it might be a little bit more lost and not quite as employable depending on what they're trying to do. And it's interesting because you talked a lot about studying the Israeli startup model. And what's also interesting in Israel is like everyone serves in the military, right? So they have this incredible technical, practical, operational background that they end up parlaying into cybersecurity or like a radar startup or chips, like whatever. And that's part of why they have such a great deep tech ecosystem. We're obviously not going to have that exact model of, forced service, at least I don't think anytime soon. But how do we emulate something similar with that practical training that empowers people, right? Like, I'm 20 years old and I'm like out there, working on millions of dollars of EV charging systems or whatever it is, right? I mean, that's so valuable. And I'm really a big believer of the apprenticeship model. And again, going back to home electrification, trends that I'm seeing, right? Home electrification, building upgrades, public EV charging network build-outs, the grid. The grid is like, our grid is not in good state right now and needs massive upgrades. So there's just like so much need for talent, and we're going to be really behind if we don't backfill.
No, I agree, and I think when we think about just investments, we've seen really, as you were saying, historic investments from the federal government. We're seeing that here in Florida, being number one in workforce, really historic investments in workforce education, from career technical education to apprenticeships and beyond. And then I think locally, the same kind of investment in talent. If you take the Venture Miami scholarships that say to anybody in the city of Miami that's going to major in STEM can attend one of our colleges at no cost, a last dollar program. We're seeing that, with the county mayor investing in the Miami Innovation Authority, which will invest in startups and then be able to find ways that they can get procurement out of the county. So that, I'm proud of the work that's happened in a really rapid period of time. And I have to say, as I go to the lightning rod, it wouldn't happen without Emerge and really the vision of 10 years ago. Imagine if Emerge was taking off today. It wouldn't be the same. They've been steady in building and bringing together that ecosystem. And that, in a sense, is where opportunity really meets, the ability to fast forward. And so I want to just ask you, as you think about the momentum that we're driving, not just here in Miami, but really globally, how do you see technology in the future? What's the one word that you would say to everyone as you think about technology, you think about the global challenges and the global opportunities ahead of us? How would you describe it?
Let me lead into the one word. I think, let me describe the word and then I'll say it. I think the future is a place where energy is abundant, where mobility is clean and accessible, where commerce is circular, and, where the environment is seen as an asset. And so, for me, that one word is abundance. But actually, let me change that. I think the one word is Wakanda.
Oh, I love that.
That was good. That was good.
Love that. Love that.
That's idyllic. That'd be nice. That'd be nice.
Yeah.
So quickly, and I did want to make one point on something else you said earlier. I feel like I haven't focused too much on the Miami community because I'm not based here. But when you asked before what we look for in founders and startups, like one thing you of course look for is like hustle and grit. And I will just say that every time I come to this city and I see the growth and I hear about all these new initiatives and hearing about even the story of Emerge, like this is a scrappy, like hustle city, and I am so impressed. So I just wanted to make that one point. And then as far as the future, love abundance. Another word, and I'm going to steal it because it's actually our tagline for my firm. We back audacious founders. So I would say for future tech, audacity, because we got to be bold. We got to dream big. We got to be a little crazy, and we got to just go after it.
We're agents of change. I like to say I'm the Jason Bourne of climate.
I love it. And I love to say that Miami's got a hustle economy like no other. And if when you leave Miami, you realize how much you miss the hustle economy, the grit and the resilience of this community. So please thank our panelists today. Jackie and Kiel were fantastic, and thank you to everybody. And it's been really a great day, and I'm going to bring Leanne Buchanan back onto the stage so we can give her a wonderful applause. Oh, I'm bringing even better, Melissa Medina. The Melissa Medina is coming up.
Thank you so much for that awesome panel. Thank you for all the Emerge shout outs, and
Thank you so much.
and welcome to Miami. But I want to say something really quick, because if it wasn't for the steadfast leadership and belief that, if I can call you Madeline, that Madeline has had in Emerge, in our crazy ideas for the last almost decade, because it was way before she was president of Miami-Dade College as well. And now we're blessed to have her leading Miami-Dade College, and it's just all full circle for us. So round of applause for the wonderful panel.
To everybody, the first 3 years of Emerge, I was a volunteer backstage, bringing up speakers.
Helping speakers back and forth. That is so true. When I say it's full circle, we were
We've
multiple
come a long
hats.
way.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much.
Of course.